In the year 2019, scientists excavating a fossil in Egypt made an extraordinary discovery. Inside the rib cage of a whale that died 38 million years ago were the bones of its last meal. The meal was another whale, not a theory, not an interpretation. The actual bones of one whale preserved inside the stomach of another for millions of years. Today, that fossil sits in the middle of a desert. When the animal was alive, the desert was an ocean, and the whale that died there was one of the most powerful predators on Earth. What's remarkable is how quickly creatures like it appeared. 52 million years ago, the ancestor of every whale alive today was a small mammal living near rivers in what is now Pakistan and India. It had fur, it had hooves, it walked on four legs, and it spent most of its life trying not to be eaten. Yet within only a few million years, its descendants were hunting in the sea. A few million years after that, they were among the largest predators on the planet. The evidence of that transformation is still alive today. Whale embryos briefly develop tiny hind limb buds before the genes responsible for legs switch off and the limbs disappear. A 50 million year old fossil discovered in Kashmir carried the body of a land mammal, but the inner ear of a whale. And in Egypt's Valley of the Whales, more than 1,000 whale skeletons lie scattered across the desert floor, preserving one of the greatest evolutionary transformations ever discovered. Tonight, we're tracing the path from a small mammal at the water's edge to the first whales that became true ocean monsters. Before we continue, a quick like or subscribe helps keep these documentaries coming. And whether you're listening from bed, the couch, or somewhere on the road, I'm glad you're here. Settle down and let's return to the time when whales walked on four legs. Across the shoreline of a vanished sea, life moved through a world that would feel unfamiliar even from orbit. The chapter of Earth's history known as the Eocene stretched from roughly 56 million to 34 million years ago, a span marked by warmth on a planetary scale. Ice did not crown the poles. Forest reached into regions that are cold today. Sea levels stood about 70 meters higher than they do now, which is about 230 feet, reshaping coastlines across entire continents. One of the defining features of that world was the Tethys Sea. It spread across a broad belt of the planet, occupying territory that would one day become parts of the Middle East, South Asia, and North Africa. Modern maps offer only fragments of its former reach. During the Eocene, however, this shallow marine realm connected immense stretches of coastline and created a mosaic of lagoons, estuaries, bays, and warm continental shelves. Fish thrived in those waters. Sharks cruised through the channels and open shallows. Sea turtles drifted between feeding grounds. Early sea cows grazed on marine vegetation near the coast. Sunlight penetrated much of the seabed, fueling productive ecosystems from the shoreline outward. The sea was rich, accessible, and crowded with opportunity. Beyond the water's edge stood dense tropical forests. Rivers crossed low coastal plains before emptying into the Tethys. Rainfall and warmth supported an abundance of plant life, creating habitats packed with insects, reptiles, birds, and mammals. The landscape that would eventually become Pakistan and Kashmir occupied a very different position from today. The collision between India and Asia was still underway, and the towering Himalayas had not yet risen to dominate the horizon. Geography itself remained in motion. Continents drifted across the globe at speeds too gradual for any living creature to notice, yet powerful enough to reshape oceans over millions of years. Coastlines shifted, river systems changed course, new habitats appeared, while others vanished beneath advancing water. Among the inhabitants of these forests were early hoofed mammals. They came in many forms, exploring different diets and lifestyles as mammalian diversity expanded across the warm world. Some browsed among vegetation, others searched the forest floor for varied food sources. Competition was constant, and successful adaptations spread through populations generation after generation. These animals belonged to a larger group that would eventually give rise to cows, pigs, deer, hippopotamuses, and something far less expected. At this stage, there was little outward hint of that future. They remained creatures of the land, living among roots, riverbanks, and woodland clearings. Out in the sea, another condition shaped the story. Large marine reptiles that had dominated earlier ages were gone. The waters held predators, yet no large mammalian hunter had claimed the role of ruler of the ocean. An ecological opening existed between the coast and the sea, between terrestrial mammals and marine abundance. The ingredients were already assembled: a productive shoreline, expansive shallow waters, forest mammals adapting to competitive environments, an ocean offering food on a scale difficult to match on land. The setting did not announce what would emerge from it. It simply existed, waiting as countless generations lived and died along the edge where earth met water. A skull no larger than a hand can sometimes carry the weight of an entire evolutionary story. For decades, fragments collected from rocks in Kashmir sat as pieces of a puzzle whose importance was still unknown. They belonged to a small mammal that lived between 50 million and 48 million years ago, long before whales ruled the oceans, long before any creature resembling a whale had fully committed itself to life in water. That animal was Indohyus. At first glance, Indohyus gave little indication of what it would later reveal. It stood only about as tall as a house cat and carried itself on slender hooved feet. A long tail balanced its body. Its narrow snout projected forward from a head shaped more like that of a small deer than anything associated with a whale. One scientist described it as resembling a cross between a rat and a deer, an image that captures its unusual appearance with surprising accuracy. Its life was spent among forests, river margins, and open patches of vegetation. Evidence suggests that it fed primarily on plants, though some researchers have proposed that small supplemental food sources may also have formed part of its diet. Nothing about its teeth or body structure points toward an active predator. Indohyus occupied a far more vulnerable position in the food web, sharing its environment with larger animals that could easily turn it into prey. Survival often depends on finding an advantage that others overlook. In the case of Indohyus, that advantage appears to have been water. Its skeleton contains a feature known as Pakicetus, an unusual thickening and densification of bone. The limb bones are far heavier than expected for an animal of its size. Similar adaptations appear in modern hippopotamuses and manatees, where dense bones act as ballast, helping the body remain submerged instead of floating upward. For Indohyus, this trait may have transformed rivers and ponds into places of refuge. When danger approached, it could enter the water and settle near the bottom, remaining concealed beneath the surface while predators searched elsewhere. The behavior resembles that of modern mouse deer in parts of Asia, which also escape threats by retreating into water. The dense bones alone would have made Indohyus an intriguing animal. The true significance of the species emerged from a far smaller structure buried deep within its skull. During the 1970s, Indian geologist Ashok Ranga Rao recovered fossil material from Kashmir. Years later, a detailed study led by Hans Thewissen brought those pieces together and exposed an anatomical feature that changed the interpretation of the animal completely. Within the skull sat an auditory bulla, a specialized ear region with a form previously known only in whales and dolphins. This discovery linked Indohyus to the Cetacean lineage through anatomy rather than appearance. Externally, it still looked like a terrestrial mammal. Internally, part of its hearing apparatus already carried the signature of descendants that would someday cross entire oceans. The importance of Indohyus rests in the motive that drew it toward water. It was searching for safety. The earliest movement toward an aquatic future began as an escape route. Across countless generations, that repeated habit placed a small hoofed mammal at the edge of a path that would eventually reshape an entire branch of life. The first step belonged to prey. Tracks pressed into damp soil vanished with each season, yet bones endured. From sediments deposited between 50 million and 48 million years ago in what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, those bones reveal an animal standing at a curious point in natural history. It looked entirely at home on land, moved across four legs, and would have passed unnoticed as a whale to anyone seeing it alive. This animal was Pakicetus. Larger than Indohyus, Pakicetus reached roughly 1 to 2 meters in length, which is about 3.3 to 6.6 feet. Its proportions resembled those of a lean predator. Long limbs carried it above the ground. Hooved feet contacted the earth beneath it. The body was built for movement across riverbanks, floodplains, and wooded terrain, where food could be found among both land and freshwater habitats. Its ankle bones provide one of the clearest clues to its ancestry. Those joints match a distinctive pattern seen in even-toed hoofed mammals, the broader group that includes deer, pigs, sheep, cattle, and hippopotamuses. The connection is written into the architecture of the skeleton itself, preserved across millions of years in stone. Viewed from the neck downward, Pakicetus appears firmly terrestrial. The surprise comes from the skull. Paleontologists classify Pakicetus as the earliest known whale because of structures housed within its head. The skull is elongated, foreshadowing proportions that would become familiar in later whale evolution. More important still is a specialized ear region known as the parietic bone. This dense structure carries features found in cetaceans and absent from other mammals. Its presence links Pakicetus directly to the whale lineage, even while the rest of the animal remained adapted for life on land. The ear tells a story that the limbs do not. Hearing underwater presents challenges very different from hearing in air. Sound travels through water with greater efficiency, and aquatic mammals often rely on alternative pathways to detect vibrations. Evidence suggests that Pakicetus could perceive underwater sounds through bone conduction, with vibrations passing through the jaw and skull toward the inner ear. The mechanism was still primitive compared with later whales, yet it marked an important departure from the sensory world of typical land mammals. Its daily life appears to have revolved around rivers and streams. Fossil evidence indicates a diet that included freshwater fish along with small terrestrial animals. Pakicetus occupied the border between two environments, gathering resources from both without fully belonging to either. Nothing in its appearance hinted at a future ocean traveler. The nostrils remained at the front of the snout, exactly where they would be expected in a land mammal. There was no blowhole, no streamlined torso, no flipper, and no tail fluke. Running remained more important than swimming. Walking remained more important than diving. Even so, a subtle shift had already taken place. A specialized ear, inherited through ancestry and refined by selection, connected Pakicetus to a lineage moving toward unfamiliar territory. The transformation was still almost invisible. It occupied a small region of the skull, while the rest of the body continued to follow an older design. Pakicetus spent its days searching for food along waterways, carrying within its head a feature that would one day accompany animals crossing entire oceans. The earliest whale still walked on land, and the future rested in its hearing. A body stretched between two worlds rarely looks elegant in either of them. Around 49 million to 47 million years ago, along estuaries that once occupied parts of northern Pakistan, a new kind of whale ancestor appeared. It did not move through forests with the confidence of earlier relatives, and it had not yet become a creature of the open sea. Its existence unfolded in the shifting boundary where rivers mixed with coastal waters. This animal was Ambulocetus natans. Its name translates as the walking whale that swims, a description unusually faithful to reality. Ambulocetus measured about 3 meters long, which is about 9.8 feet, and weighed roughly 300 to 400 pounds. The body carried a long snout and a powerful torso positioned close to the ground. Modern comparisons often draw from otters, sea lions, and crocodiles, though Ambulocetus combined features in a way that belonged entirely to its own moment in evolution. Movement through water had become central to its life. The hind feet were exceptionally large, shaped into broad paddles that were almost certainly connected by webbing. Instead of relying on the forelimbs for propulsion, Ambulocetus generated thrust through powerful strokes of the rear limbs while flexing its spine from side to side. The pattern resembles the swimming style of modern otters, though performed by an animal far larger and heavier. Dry land presented a different challenge. Examination of the femur reveals relatively modest attachment areas for the large muscles needed in efficient terrestrial locomotion. This suggests that Ambulocetus was less capable of sustained walking than its predecessors. Crossing shorelines and riverbanks remained possible, yet its movements there were likely cumbersome, involving a low, rolling gait and periods of dragging or shuffling. The balance between land and water had begun to shift. Changes were appearing in the skull as well. The nostrils still occupied the front portion of the snout, preserving the familiar arrangement inherited from terrestrial ancestors. Their position, however, had started a gradual migration toward the rear. The adjustment was subtle, measured in small anatomical increments, though it marked the beginning of a journey that would eventually place the breathing opening at the top of the head. Chemical traces preserved in its teeth provide another glimpse into daily life. During growth, oxygen from consumed water became incorporated into dental tissues. Millions of years later, those signatures remain readable. Analysis shows that Ambulocetus drank both fresh water and salt water, indicating regular movement through estuarine environments where rivers and marine waters met. Its range extended across ecological boundaries, allowing access to resources from both systems. The shape of its jaws and the placement of its eyes suggest a patient hunter. Ambulocetus likely spent long periods in shallow water, waiting for prey to approach before launching a rapid attack. Fish, small vertebrates, and other available animals would have formed part of its diet. The strategy recalls modern crocodiles, though Ambulocetus belonged to a lineage following a very different path. Its importance became fully visible after fossils discovered in 1992 were studied by Johannes Gerardus, Maria Thuisen, and colleagues in the Calachita Hills. Paleontologists had anticipated a form bridging terrestrial whales and more aquatic descendants. Ambulocetus appeared in exactly the right place and time, carrying in its skeleton the record of a lineage learning how to live between shore and sea. Deep within a fossil tooth, a record can survive long after muscles, skin, and behavior have vanished. It survives without words, preserved in chemistry. Long after an animal has disappeared, and long after the landscape around it has transformed, tiny atoms remain locked inside the growing tissues of bone and enamel, carrying traces of the water that once passed through a living body. This is one of the most powerful tools available to paleontologists: oxygen isotope analysis. Every animal absorbs oxygen throughout its life. Water enters the body through drinking and food, then becomes incorporated into developing bones and teeth. Fresh water and salt water contain different proportions of oxygen isotopes, particularly oxygen 18 and oxygen 16. Those differences are subtle, yet they leave measurable signatures that persist across millions of years. When scientists analyze fossil teeth, they can compare the relative abundance of these isotopes and determine the type of water an animal regularly consumed while growing. The technique allows researchers to reconstruct habitats with remarkable precision. A tooth becomes a chemical diary, preserving evidence from a world otherwise lost. For the earliest whale relatives, this method provides an independent record of a transition already hinted at by anatomy. The teeth of Pakicetus carry a signature associated with fresh water. The animal hunted near rivers and streams, and the chemistry confirms what its skeleton suggests. Its life remained tied to terrestrial environments and inland waterways. Although its skull contained the distinctive ear structures of later whales, its daily existence unfolded on the freshwater side of the shoreline. Ambulocetus presents a different pattern. The isotope values found in its teeth reveal exposure to both fresh water and salt water during life. The animal occupied estuaries, moving through regions where rivers mixed with marine environments. Its body already reflected this intermediate existence, and the chemistry preserved in its teeth reaches the same conclusion through an entirely separate line of evidence. As whale evolution continued, the pattern shifted further. Members of the protocetid group, including animals such as Pakicetus, display isotope signatures consistent with marine habitats. Their chemical profiles resemble those of creatures spending substantial portions of life in salt water. By this stage, the connection to the sea had deepened. The evidence suggests that these animals were no longer occasional visitors to coastal environments. Marine ecosystems had become part of their regular existence. What makes isotope analysis especially compelling is the independence of the method. The teeth are not responding to expectations about body shape or evolutionary relationships. They preserve information through chemical processes that operated while the animal was alive. Skeletons can reveal how an animal moved. Teeth can reveal where it drank. Placed side by side, the results form a sequence: fresh water in Pakicetus, mixed water in Ambulocetus, marine signatures in later protocetids. Each step appears in the order predicted by the anatomical changes unfolding across the lineage. The story emerges through accumulation rather than proclamation. Small shifts in chemistry accompany small shifts in lifestyle. Generation after generation, the record grows saltier. Rivers give way to estuaries. Estuaries give way to coastal seas. Before the transformation became obvious in the body, traces of it had already entered the bones. The ocean left its mark there first, atom by atom, carried inward with every drink. The pelvis of a walking mammal is built like a bridge. It locks the spine to the hips, receives force from the hind limbs, and turns each step into forward motion. In Rodhocetus, that bridge was beginning to loosen. Between 47 million and 41 million years ago, along the marine margins of what is now Pakistan, the skeleton of an early whale recorded a body giving up the old mechanics of land. Rhodhocetus measured roughly 2.5 meters long, which is about 8.2 feet. It still possessed four limbs, though their proportions no longer belonged to an animal built for confident walking. The forelimbs were short, compact, and increasingly flipper-like. The hind limbs were longer and more powerful, shaped for propulsion in water through alternating strokes. A living Rhodocetus would have moved more like a sea otter than a deer, driving itself forward with the rear half of the body while the front limbs helped steer. The most revealing change lay near the base of the spine. In land mammals, the sacrum forms a firm connection between the backbone and pelvis. That connection gives the hind limbs a rigid platform for pushing against the ground. In Rhodocetus, the attachment had weakened. The spine and hips were no longer tied together with the same strength found in earlier terrestrial relatives. Step by step, the body was losing the ability to make walking its central mode of travel. Water rewarded that loosening. A flexible spine could bend through the body during swimming, allowing motion to travel from the torso toward the tail. Rhodocetus had not yet become a tail-powered whale in the modern sense, yet its anatomy was moving in that direction. The hind feet still supplied much of the force. The tail likely helped control direction, acting as a rudder near the surface rather than as the main engine. Its skin probably still carried fur. Blubber had not yet become the thick insulating layer that would later define many fully aquatic whales. Rhodocetus was warm-blooded, air-breathing, and mammalian, tied to the surface by every breath. It lived in water more completely than Ambulocetus, but its body still belonged to an intermediate stage, where old traits remained useful while new demands reshaped the skeleton. The skull also continued the gradual rearrangement begun earlier in the lineage. The nostrils had shifted farther back along the snout, moving away from the front of the face. They were still far from the blowhole position of modern whales, though the direction of change was unmistakable. Breathing was being reorganized around a life spent increasingly in water. Fossils of Rhodhocetus come from marine sediments, rocks formed under open sea conditions. That setting matters. It places the animal away from the riverbank world of earlier forms and into habitats where land was no longer the daily center of existence. The shoreline had become less important than the water beyond it. Rhodocetus marks a threshold written in bone. Its limbs remained. Its lungs still demanded air, and its body still carried memories of land. Yet the spine, pelvis, nostrils, and limbs were already answering to the sea. The old bridge was loosening, and the animal that crossed it was becoming harder to call terrestrial. Maps drawn from the fossil record reveal a pattern that would have seemed impossible only a few million years earlier. Bones belonging to related whale ancestors appear thousands of kilometers apart, scattered across coastlines separated by entire oceans. The distribution is so broad that it marks a new phase in the story, one in which whale evolution ceased to be a local phenomenon and became a planetary one. Between 48 million and 42 million years ago, a group known as the Protocetids expanded far beyond their South Asian origins. Their remains have been discovered in Pakistan, India, Egypt, West Africa, the eastern United States, and Peru. Taken together, these finds trace one of the most successful dispersals achieved by any mammalian lineage of the Eocene. The geography of the time made such movement possible. The Tethys Sea stretched across a huge portion of the globe, linking coastal habitats into a connected marine network. Warm, shallow waters reached into bays, channels, lagoons, and continental shelves. For animals already spending most of their lives in the water, these environments provided pathways extending far beyond the region where their ancestors first entered aquatic habitats. Movement no longer depended on crossing unfamiliar terrain on foot. Coastlines became routes. Marine corridors linked distant ecosystems. Each generation could push a little farther along the margins of continents, expanding the range of the lineage without any single journey needing to be extraordinary. Fossils preserve the evidence of that expansion. Similar whale forms appear on multiple continents within a relatively short geological interval. The pattern suggests repeated dispersal through connected waterways rather than isolated evolutionary experiments occurring independently in different regions. One of the most important discoveries came in 2011. In Peru, researchers described a four-legged whale that had lived along the Pacific coast of South America. Its anatomy clearly connected it to protocetid relatives known from much farther east. The finding demonstrated that early whales had crossed from the Old World to the New World in less than 10 million years. During the Eocene, the Atlantic Ocean was narrower than it is today. The distance remained substantial, yet it was no longer an impassable barrier for animals increasingly adapted to marine life. Their bodies had reached a stage where coastlines separated by vast stretches of water could become part of the same evolutionary landscape. Each new region introduced different conditions. Water chemistry varied, currents shifted, available prey changed from one coastline to another, competition differed from place to place. These factors acted upon protocetid populations wherever they settled, encouraging further modifications to swimming ability, feeding behavior, and life in marine environments. The spread itself became an evolutionary force. Animals occupying larger ranges encounter a greater variety of challenges. Those challenges generate opportunities for adaptation, and adaptation opens access to still more habitats. Expansion and transformation began reinforcing one another, creating momentum that carried the lineage outward across multiple continents. By this stage, whale ancestors were no longer confined to the waters where their story began. Their descendants had become travelers of connected seas, extending their presence across much of the Eocene world. The shoreline that once defined their existence was fading into the background. Water linked distant populations together, and movement through that water was becoming the defining feature of their history. A curious detail lingered at the edge of the whale story, long after the shoreline itself had faded from view. Deep within bodies now shaped for life in open water, traces of an older existence remained. They no longer served a purpose in movement, yet they endured, carried forward from ancestors that had once crossed riverbanks and walked beneath forest canopies. Between 41 million and 33 million years ago, during the later part of the Eocene, one of the clearest examples of this transition swam through warm seas. Its name was Dorodon atrox. At roughly 5 meters long, which is about 16.4 miles. No, at roughly 5 meters long, it possessed the proportions of a true whale. Its body was streamlined. A horizontal tail fluke-powered it through the water. Seen from a distance, it would have been recognizable as a whale in nearly every meaningful respect. Yet evolution had left a signature near the base of its tail. There, attached to the skeleton but disconnected from the spine's work of locomotion, sat tiny hind limbs. They did not touch the ground. They contributed nothing to swimming. They hung within the body as remnants of a past chapter. These structures were vestigial, inherited from ancestors whose legs had once carried their weight across land. The remarkable part was how complete those limbs remained. Dorodon still possessed femurs, tibias, and toe bones. The architecture of a leg survived even after its original function had vanished. Natural selection had reduced the limbs dramatically, though it had not erased them entirely. They persisted as anatomical echoes, preserved within a creature that would never take a step. Even the ankle carried a clue to ancestry. The bones retained the distinctive double pulley structure characteristic of the hoofed mammal group that includes deer and cows. That feature had once helped support movement on land. In Dorodon, it remained as inherited anatomy, disconnected from the lifestyle that had originally shaped it. By this stage, the transition to aquatic life had become complete. Dorodon lived, hunted, mated, and traveled entirely within the sea. Its young entered a world of water from the beginning of life. Land had become a distant biological memory, encoded within bones and developmental pathways. Evidence from Egypt reveals another dimension of its existence. In the desert region, known today as Wadi al-Hitan, paleontologists have uncovered sites containing numerous young Dorodon individuals. Many of their skulls preserve tooth marks left by a predator of enormous size. The pattern appears repeatedly. Juveniles were attacked before reaching full maturity. Some skeletons bear injuries concentrated around the head and face, suggesting deliberate predation. These were not isolated accidents scattered across time. They formed part of a recurring ecological relationship within Eocene seas. The animal responsible was Basilosaurus isis, a whale so large that Dorodon occupied the role of prey alongside it. While Dorodon carried the fading remnants of legs from the distant past, it also inhabited an ocean already governed by specialized marine hunters. The transformation had progressed far enough that whales were no longer adapting to the sea. They had become major participants in its food webs. Inside Dorodon's skeleton, however, the old world still lingered. Tiny legs remained suspended within a body built entirely for water, preserving the memory of a journey written bone by bone across millions of years. Some fossils are so large that the first explanation feels inadequate. When the bones of Basilosaurus were uncovered in the 1830s in Louisiana, their scale seemed to belong to something reptilian, something closer to a serpent or a great marine lizard than a mammal. The name given to it, Basilosaurus, means king lizard. The animal behind the name was no lizard at all. It was a whale. During the later Eocene, between 38 million and 34 million years ago, Basilosaurus isis moved through warm seas as one of the most formidable predators of its age. It could reach up to 18 meters long, which is about 59 feet, and weigh up to 20 tons. Its length alone made it unlike the smaller whale ancestors that had come before. Its body stretched into a narrow, sinuous form, closer in outline to a sea serpent than to the compact shape of modern whales. That long body was not stiff. The vertebrae suggest an animal capable of powerful, undulating movement through the water. Its spine could flex in sweeping waves, driving the body forward with a kind of motion that later whales would largely leave behind. A living Basilosaurus would have moved with muscular curves, passing through the sea as a predator built from an older design, refined for dominance. Its skull completed the transformation from shoreline hunter to ocean ruler. The teeth of Basilosaurus were specialized weapons. At the front of the jaws, conical incisors gripped struggling prey. Farther back, triangular molars with serrated edges sliced through flesh. These were differentiated teeth divided into rolls. Unlike the simpler tooth patterns of many later whales, they belonged to an animal that seized, held, and tore warm-blooded prey. The structure of the jaws confirms the role implied by the teeth. Basilosaurus was an active predator, adapted for killing large animals in open water. It fed on fish, sharks, and other marine vertebrates, and evidence from later discoveries shows that young whales also formed part of its diet. By this stage, the descendants of land mammals were no longer edging cautiously into marine food webs. They were reshaping them from the top. Its hind limbs had become tiny and useless for locomotion, reduced to remnants near the rear of the body. The legs that once supported distant ancestors had nearly vanished, while the skull, spine, and teeth had become tools of marine power. The contrast within the skeleton is striking. One end preserved the fading memory of land, the other carried the equipment of an apex predator. Basilosaurus was the first known mammal descended from a terrestrial lineage to become a true ruler of the open ocean. It was not a grazer of seafloor plants. It was not a filter feeder drifting through schools of plankton. It pursued prey in the water, and no larger mammalian hunter stood above it. In less than 15 million years, a small hoofed creature near the waters of South Asia had given rise to a 20-ton predator of the sea. Basilosaurus was the moment when the transformation became impossible to miss. The whale lineage had entered the ocean, altered its body, and produced a monster. Most ancient predators are known through indirect traces. A tooth found beside scattered bones, a bite mark preserved on a skeleton, a damaged shell, a healed wound. Paleontologists often reconstruct behavior from fragments separated by time and circumstance. Every so often, the record preserves something far more direct. In 2019, researchers published one of the most revealing discoveries in the history of whale paleontology. The evidence came from Wadi al-Hitan in Egypt, a site that had already transformed our understanding of early whales. During the excavation of a Basilosaurus isis skeleton, scientists examined the region where the stomach contents had once rested. What they found provided a rare glimpse into a meal consumed 38 million years ago. Mixed among fish remains, shark teeth, and other debris were bones belonging to young Dorudon atrox. The significance was immediate. These were not fragments from fully grown animals that happened to be deposited nearby. The remains were located within the body cavity of the predator itself. They represented prey that had been consumed before the Basilosaurus died. The relationship between hunter and victim was preserved within a single fossil. Closer examination revealed another detail. The Dorudon remains belonged to juveniles. Measurements of skull fragments and associated bones matched young individuals rather than adults. These were calves, still early in life, considerably smaller and more vulnerable than mature members of their species. The discovery connected with evidence already known from the surrounding landscape. Throughout Wadi al-Hitan, paleontologists had uncovered numerous young Dorudon skeletons. Several skulls displayed distinctive bite marks. The spacing between those marks corresponded closely to the arrangement of teeth in Basilosaurus isis. Individually, each clue suggested predation. Together, they formed a coherent picture. The area appears to have served as a calving ground where Dorudon mothers gave birth and raised their young. Such locations concentrate vulnerable animals in predictable places. For a large predator, they represent reliable hunting opportunities. The fossil evidence indicates that Basilosaurus exploited this pattern. Behavior rarely fossilizes. Bones preserve anatomy with remarkable fidelity, yet the actions of living creatures usually vanish without a trace. Here, however, behavior left an imprint strong enough to survive millions of years. The predator consumed young whales. The prey accumulated in a specific habitat. Tooth marks matched the hunter. Stomach contents confirm the connection. A scene from the late Eocene emerges with unusual clarity. Warm coastal waters supported populations of Dorudon calves growing under the protection of their mothers. Nearby, Basilosaurus moved through the same ecosystem, searching for opportunities. The young animals represented easier targets than healthy adults. Natural selection favors efficiency, and predators that identify predictable food sources often gain an advantage. What makes the discovery especially compelling is its immediacy. There is little distance between observation and conclusion. Scientists are not relying on a chain of assumptions extending across multiple layers of evidence. The prey was found inside the predator, within stone formed from an Eocene sea floor. An ordinary hunting event endured through geological time. A whale hunted another whale. The remains of that encounter survived continental change, climate change, and extinction itself. Millions of years later, the evidence remained where it had been left, still resting inside the body of the hunter that consumed it. A traveler arriving there today encounters a landscape shaped by heat, wind, and distance. The western desert of Egypt stretches outward in every direction, a terrain of pale stone, drifting sand, and ridges carved by erosion. About 150 kilometers, which is about 93 miles, southwest of Cairo, signs of the modern ocean are entirely absent. Yet scattered across this desert floor lies evidence that the region once belonged to a very different world. 38 million years ago, the ground beneath those sands rested beneath warm coastal waters. Fish moved through broad lagoons. Sea turtles crossed shallow channels. Sharks cruised above soft sediment. Sea cows grazed on marine vegetation. Early whales traveled through an ecosystem filled with life, leaving behind remains that would endure far longer than the sea itself. That vanished environment is preserved at Wadi al-Hitan, known in English as the Valley of Whales. Among all fossil localities on Earth, few have contributed more to understanding the transformation of whales from land mammals into permanent inhabitants of the ocean. The site has earned recognition as a World Heritage Location because of the extraordinary quality and abundance of its fossils. More than 1,000 whale skeletons have been documented there. Many remain articulated, with bones preserved in their original positions. Some specimens retain details so complete that scientists can reconstruct anatomy with unusual precision. A few even preserve traces of stomach contents, providing direct evidence of feeding behavior from a distant chapter of Earth's history. Walking across the valley today reveals skeleton after skeleton emerging from the rock. Vertebrae, ribs, skulls, and jaws appear along slopes and ridges where erosion has gradually exposed them. The desert acts almost like a patient curator, removing layers of sediment grain by grain until bones that rested underground for millions of years become visible once more. Among the most striking discoveries are the remains of Basilosaurus. Some individuals reached lengths approaching 18 meters, which is about 59 feet. Their vertebrae are immense. A single backbone can be nearly as wide as a dinner plate, hinting at the scale of predators that once dominated these waters. Even after fossilization and erosion, the skeletons retain a presence that is difficult to ignore. The valley preserves much more than whales. Fossils of crocodiles, sharks, sea turtles, sea cows, and large fish occur throughout the deposits. Together they form an ecological portrait rather than a collection of isolated specimens. Predator and prey, hunter and scavenger, swimmer and grazer all occupy the same geological archive. The result is a remarkably complete record of a late Eocene marine community. One feature makes Wadi al-Hitan especially valuable to science. The rock layers capture early whales at different stages of anatomical change. In older deposits, traces of hind limbs remain more apparent. In younger layers, those limbs shrink further. The progression can be followed through time, revealing the final steps in a transformation that had begun millions of years earlier along distant shorelines. The sea disappeared, continents shifted, sediments hardened into stone, winds reshaped the surface again and again. Through all those changes, the valley endured as a record of a world that no longer exists, holding its fossils beneath the desert until they were ready to be found. Climate can close one chapter of life while opening another. Around 34 million years ago, the Eocene world began to change with a force that reached from the poles to the tropics. The long interval of warmth that had carried early whales from river margins into open seas gave way to a cooler planet. Ocean currents reorganized, coastlines shifted. The old geography that had supported Archaeocete whales began to fracture. The Tethys Sea, once a broad pathway across warm latitudes, was being compressed as Africa and Eurasia moved toward one another. Marine routes narrowed. Habitats that had once connected populations became altered or lost. At the poles, ice began forming on a scale the Eocene had not known. The ocean became colder, more layered, and less familiar to animals shaped by earlier conditions. The Archaeocetes, the group that included Basilosaurus, Dorudon, and their relatives, did not survive this transition. Their lineage faded from the record as the Eocene ended and the Oligocene began. These were the whales that had carried the story from hoofed bodies to fully aquatic predators, yet their own branch did not continue into the modern world. Before their disappearance, however, the future had already divided. From within the broader whale lineage, two new branches had emerged. One would become the Mysticetes, the baleen whales. The other would become the Odontocetes, the toothed whales. Their common ancestor likely lived near this turning point, around 34 million years ago, in a body that had not yet fully committed to either of the defining strategies seen today. It probably did not possess true baleen in the modern sense. It also lacked the advanced echolocation system that would later make toothed whales such extraordinary hunters. It belonged to a transitional moment after the age of Archaeocete dominance, before the ocean had been divided between filtering giants and acoustic predators. The split that followed reshaped cetacean evolution. In one lineage, teeth would eventually lose their central role. Feeding would move toward filtration, toward taking immense volumes of water into the mouth and straining small prey from it. That pathway would require changes to the skull, jaws, tongue, palate, and feeding muscles. It would lead, much later, to animals capable of consuming entire swarms of tiny marine life by the ton. In the other lineage, teeth remained essential. Hunting became tied to sound, speed, social behavior, and sensory precision. The skull changed in a different direction, accommodating systems for producing and focusing clicks. The lower jaw became part of a pathway for receiving, returning echoes. Prey could be detected through water where vision failed. Both branches inherited the same deep past. Both carried remnants of terrestrial ancestry inside bodies already transformed for the sea. Yet each lineage explored a different solution to marine life. One expanded feeding by filtering abundance, the other refined pursuit through sound. The end of the Eocene removed the old rulers, but it did not end the whale story. It divided it. From that fork came two legacies still moving through the ocean today, one shaped by the capture of tiny prey, the other by the art of finding animals through echoes. Darkness in the ocean is different from darkness on land. A forest at night still carries outlines, shadows, and fragments of moonlight. Far below the waves, vision eventually reaches its limits. Water absorbs light, scatters it, and turns distance into obscurity. For one branch of whales, this challenge became an opportunity to create something entirely new. The toothed whales, known scientifically as odontocets, inherited the body of a marine mammal, but transformed one of its most ordinary structures into an extraordinary sensory system. In land mammals, the nasal passage serves familiar purposes, carrying air and supporting the sense of smell. Within toothed whales, parts of that passage were gradually reshaped into an organ capable of generating powerful bursts of sound. Air moving through specialized tissues called phonic lips produces a rapid series of clicks. These sounds do not emerge from the mouth or throat. They originate within passages located high in the head, where anatomy has been rearranged over millions of years of evolution. The process resembles neither a bark nor a call. It functions more like an acoustic instrument built into the skull itself. Once generated, the clicks are directed forward by a structure known as the melon. This rounded mass of specialized fat occupies much of the forehead and acts as a biological lens for sound. Just as glass can focus light into a beam, the melon concentrates acoustic energy into a controlled signal traveling through the surrounding water. The clicks move outward for hundreds of meters, which is about 656 feet. They strike fish, rocky slopes, drifting objects, sea ice, and other animals. Each encounter sends echoes back through the water. What returns carries information about distance, shape, size, density, and movement. The ocean becomes filled with reflections that the whale can interpret. Receiving those reflections required another innovation. The external ear canal, so important in many land mammals, became greatly reduced. Sound instead enters through specialized fats within the lower jaw. Vibrations pass inward toward the middle and inner ear, where they are processed with remarkable precision. The jaw becomes part of the hearing apparatus, collecting information from the water and delivering it directly into the nervous system. Through this system, a toothed whale can construct an acoustic picture of its surroundings. Murky water poses little obstacle. Darkness becomes largely irrelevant. A moving fish may reveal itself through echoes long before it can be seen. Objects hidden beyond clouds of sediment remain detectable. Entire schools of prey can be mapped through sound alone. The effectiveness of this ability is tied to the physics of water itself. Sound travels through water at roughly 4 times the speed that it travels through air. Evolution did not create that property, yet toothed whales learned to exploit it. Their bodies became instruments tuned to an environment where sound often provides richer information than sight. No terrestrial mammal developed a system quite like this one. Bats evolved their own form of echolocation in the air, yet the whale version followed a separate path and arose under entirely different conditions. From structures once devoted to breathing and scent, a new sensory world emerged. Within the ocean, toothed whales gained the ability to perceive through echoes, turning sound into a way of knowing the shape of the sea around them. A different future was taking shape in the oceans, one that depended less on speed, pursuit, and precision. While toothed whales refined the art of tracking prey through sound, another lineage moved toward abundance itself, finding advantage in the countless small organisms drifting through the sea. The mysticetes, known today as baleen whales, followed a path that eventually abandoned active hunting altogether. Their success would come through filtration, a strategy so effective that it would one day support the largest animals Earth has ever produced. Yet that outcome began with anatomical changes that unfolded across millions of years. Baleen is often mistaken for a form of tooth, though it is something entirely different. These structures are made from keratin, the same material found in human hair and fingernails. From the upper jaw hang long overlapping plates, whose inner edges separate into fine strands. Together, they form a dense filtering curtain suspended inside the mouth. Feeding with baleen transforms the ocean itself into a source of concentrated nourishment. A whale takes in an immense volume of seawater and then forces it outward again with the tongue. Water escapes through the baleen, while krill, copepods, and small fish remain trapped behind the fibrous screen. What appears at first glance to be a passive method is among the most efficient feeding systems evolution has ever assembled. In productive waters, enormous quantities of food can be gathered with surprisingly little effort. A single large baleen whale may consume up to 6 tons of prey during a day of intensive feeding. Such numbers are possible because the prey arrive in dense swarms, numbering into the millions. Instead of chasing individual animals, the whale harvests entire concentrations of life at once. This transformation did not occur in a sudden leap. Fossils reveal a long interval during which the old machinery and the new existed side by side. Early members of the Mysticate lineage remained relatively modest in size, measuring between 5 kilometers, which is about 3.1 miles, and 9 kilometers, which is about 5.6 miles, in the user-provided source description. In scientific reality, those measurements refer to meters, and these animals were approximately the size of a modern minke whale. Within their jaws, the transition can be seen unfolding piece by piece. Some early mysticetes possessed functional teeth while also developing structures associated with baleen. They occupied a biological middle ground, carrying traces of the predator they had once been, while experimenting with an entirely different way of feeding. Few evolutionary changes are preserved with such clarity. Even after teeth disappeared from adult baleen whales, the memory of those structures remained embedded within their inheritance. Modern mysticetes still carry inactive genetic instructions associated with tooth development. The coding survives, though it no longer performs its former task. Deep within the genome rest fragments of an older design, retained across tens of millions of years. The story preserved in those remnants is one of replacement rather than erasure. Teeth yielded to baleen, pursuit yielded to filtration, and a lineage that once shared the predatory traditions of its relatives discovered another route through the ocean. From that decision emerged a feeding strategy capable of sustaining giants, built from strands of keratin hanging where teeth once stood. Some fossils answer long-standing questions. Others reveal that the question itself was incomplete. Among the most illuminating discoveries in whale evolution is an animal that occupied a brief and unexpected chapter, a creature whose anatomy preserved a stage few researchers had anticipated with such clarity. Myabalaena nesbitae lived approximately 33 million years ago along the shores of a marine environment that once covered parts of what is now Oregon. By that time, the great split between toothed whales and baleen whales was already underway. New feeding strategies were emerging, old ones were fading, and evolutionary experimentation filled the oceans with forms unlike anything alive today. The skeleton of Myabalaena carries an unusual message. It lacked teeth entirely. At first glance, that absence might suggest a baleen whale, yet close examination revealed no evidence that baleen had developed either. The animal occupied a middle position between two well-known conditions. It belonged fully to neither. This combination presented a puzzle. Predatory ancestors had relied on teeth to seize prey. Later, baleen whales would strain immense quantities of food from seawater using keratin filtering structures suspended from the upper jaw. Myabalena possessed neither system. The fossil captured a moment when one solution had disappeared and another had not yet arrived. Researchers studying its skull proposed a compelling explanation. The animal may have fed through suction, drawing prey inward by rapidly expanding the mouth and throat region. Several modern marine mammals use similar methods. Certain seals, for example, can generate powerful suction forces capable of pulling fish and soft bodied animals directly into the mouth without relying heavily on teeth. The shape of the skull supports this possibility. Features associated with strong suction feeding appear more developed than would be expected in a traditional hunting whale. Rather than pursuing large prey or filtering dense swarms of tiny organisms, Myabalena may have occupied a different ecological role, gathering smaller animals through controlled movements of water and pressure. Its importance extends far beyond diet. For decades, many reconstructions imagine baleen evolving alongside the gradual loss of teeth. Myabalena suggested a more complicated sequence. Teeth vanished first. Baleen emerged later. Between those events existed a transitional interval during which whales survived using alternative feeding strategies. That insight transformed a gap in the fossil record into a visible stage of evolution. The transition from one biological system to another did not occur through a direct replacement completed in a single step. Intermediate solutions carried lineages forward, while larger anatomical changes unfolded across generations. Viewed from that perspective, Myabalena becomes more than an oddity. It represents a living experiment preserved in stone. The animal was neither incomplete nor unsuccessful. It thrived in its own time, adapted to its own environment, and participated in a process that would eventually produce some of the largest creatures ever known. Its fossil offers a rare glimpse into evolutionary uncertainty. Ancient traits had already slipped away. Future traits remained under construction. For a brief interval along a distant shoreline, a whale lived between those worlds, carrying evidence that transformation often proceeds through stages that appear unusual only when viewed from the future. The story appears again long before a whale takes its first breath. Hidden within the earliest stages of development is a brief chapter that unfolds deep inside the womb, a chapter written by ancestors that vanished tens of millions of years ago. Every modern whale embryo begins life carrying instructions inherited from a lineage that once crossed riverbanks, wandered floodplains, and stood on four limbs. For a short period during fetal development, those instructions become visible. Tiny hind limb buds emerge from the growing body, arranged with a precision that reflects an older blueprint. Though small, these structures are organized in familiar ways, containing the early foundations of a femur, a tibia, and even the beginnings of digits. At that stage, the embryo does not resemble the streamlined swimmer it will become. It briefly follows a developmental pathway shaped by a distant past. Cells divide, tissues specialize, and the outlines of legs appear exactly where legs once belonged in whale ancestors. Then the process changes direction. A crucial genetic pathway becomes suppressed. Among the genes involved is HAND2, a regulator of limb development, whose activity influences how these structures continue to grow. As its expression is reduced, growth within the hind limb bud slows dramatically. Development halts before the limbs can mature. The tiny protrusions shrink, their tissues gradually reabsorbed into the surrounding body. Weeks later, little evidence remains that they ever existed. When a whale calf enters the world, the familiar form of a marine mammal has taken shape. The hind limbs have vanished, leaving only internal remnants deep within the body. Yet, the embryo carried them for a time, replaying a fragment of evolutionary history before developmental signals redirected the course. This process offers an important reminder about evolution. New forms rarely emerge by erasing everything that came before. Older instructions often persist within the genome, modified, regulated, and redirected across generations. The genetic information required to build hind limbs did not disappear when whales abandoned land. Much of it remains present, though carefully controlled. On rare occasions, that control falters. A handful of documented whales and dolphins have developed external hind limb protrusions, unusual structures composed of bone, muscle, and connective tissue. One widely discussed example involved a sperm whale recovered near Japan in the middle of the 20th century. Several bottlenose dolphins have displayed similar features. These appendages are small and non-functional, yet their significance extends far beyond their size. Biologists refer to such occurrences as atavisms, the reappearance of ancestral traits after millions of years of absence. They are developmental echoes, moments when genetic pathways normally kept dormant become active once more. The result is not the return of a fully formed ancestral animal, but a glimpse of instructions that still reside within the genome. Seen through that lens, an atavistic limb becomes something extraordinary. It is evidence that evolutionary history remains embedded within living bodies. The past is not discarded as species change. Fragments endure, carried forward through countless generations. For whales, those fragments appear first in the embryo. A small limb bud forms, pauses, and fades. The sequence lasts only a brief interval, yet it preserves one of the most remarkable records of ancestry found anywhere in nature. The body remembers a shoreline left behind long ago, and for a moment, before development continues, it shows that memory once again. Deep within the body of every modern whale lies a structure that seems, at first glance, out of place. Hidden among layers of muscle and blubber are small pelvic bones, remnants of an anatomy that once connected an animal to the ground. They are easy to overlook, overshadowed by the immense skeleton surrounding them, yet they carry one of the clearest records of the whale's journey from land to sea. Unlike the pelvis of a deer, cow, or other hoofed mammal, these bones no longer connect to the spine. They do not support body weight. They play no role in walking, standing, or running. Floating freely within soft tissue, they appear detached from the framework that once gave them purpose. For generations, biologists regarded them as vestiges, leftovers from a previous existence. The interpretation seemed straightforward. As whale ancestors adapted to life in water, hind limbs diminished, locomotion shifted to the tail, and the pelvis gradually shrank. What remained appeared to be a fading relic, a structure drifting toward eventual disappearance. The story proved more complicated. Detailed anatomical studies revealed that these bones continue to serve an important function. Research published during the early 21st century examined pelvic bones across a wide range of whale species and uncovered a pattern that challenged the traditional view. Although disconnected from locomotion, the pelvis had acquired a new role. In males, it serves as an anchor for muscles associated with reproductive organs, providing attachment points essential for precise control and positioning. A structure inherited from walking ancestors had become integrated into a completely different biological system. Seen from an evolutionary perspective, This transformation reflects a recurring pattern. Features are often modified and reassigned instead of being discarded outright. Natural selection works with existing materials, reshaping old structures to meet new demands. The whale pelvis illustrates this process with unusual clarity. The same bones that once helped transmit force from hind limbs to the ground now contribute to reproduction in an animal that has spent millions of years moving through water. Further investigation uncovered another intriguing relationship. Across different whale species, pelvic bone size tends to correlate with testis size and mating behavior. Species facing intense reproductive competition often possess relatively larger pelvic bones. The connection suggests that sexual selection, acting across countless generations, helped shape structures once thought to be biologically insignificant. Such findings transform the pelvis from a fading remnant into an active participant in the life of the animal. Its presence is no longer explained solely by ancestry. It persists because it continues to provide value. The broader lesson extends beyond whales themselves. Evolution rarely resembles the replacement of one machine by another. Older parts are frequently retained, modified, and integrated into new systems. Traces of previous worlds remain embedded within living bodies, carrying histories that stretch far beyond the present moment. Inside a whale, that history can be measured in bone. The pelvis no longer reaches toward legs, and it no longer bears the weight of a body crossing land. Its original task vanished long ago. Yet the structure endured, acquiring a different purpose as generations passed. The whale carries that transformed inheritance within itself. A bone once linked to footsteps now serves a life spent entirely in the ocean, altered by time, adapted by necessity, and preserved as a living reminder that evolution often changes direction without erasing where it began. Breathing shaped whale evolution as surely as swimming did. A mammal can enter the ocean, change its limbs, alter its spine, and remake its senses, yet every breath still ties it to air. For whales, that need forced one of the most visible migrations in the skull, the gradual relocation of the nostrils from the front of the face to the crown of the head. In Pakicetus, the nostrils remained where any land mammal would carry them. They opened at the front of the snout, suited to an animal moving along riverbanks and breathing with its whole head above the surface. Nothing about their position suggested the breathing system of a modern whale. The body still belonged largely to land, and the face preserved that older arrangement. Ambulocetus carried the first small shift. Its nostrils still sat forward, though they had moved slightly back along the skull. The change was modest, measured across bone rather than seen as a dramatic transformation. Even so, it marked the beginning of a rearrangement that would continue across millions of years. In Rhodocetus, the movement became more apparent. The nostrils had traveled farther back, positioned closer to the upper surface of the skull and no longer fixed at the very tip of the snout. This placement suited an animal spending more time in water, where lifting less of the head could make breathing easier and more efficient. By the time Basilosaurus ruled late Eocene seas, the nostrils had nearly reached the top of the skull. The body had become fully aquatic, and the breathing opening now reflected that commitment. A large animal moving through water no longer needed to raise a long snout like a land mammal. It could surface with less effort, bringing only the upper head close enough to air. Modern whales complete that journey. In toothed whales, the blowhole is a single opening. In baleen whales, it is paired. Both forms sit above the brain case, placed for quick breathing at the surface. A whale can inhale and exhale without lifting the whole head, preserving momentum while keeping most of the body supported by water. The fossil record traces this migration across roughly 15 million years. In one skull after another, the nostrils move from snout to forehead, from a forward-facing mammalian nose toward the specialized blowhole of living whales. The change was gradual, but its direction is unmistakable. Two small openings drifted across the face as the lineage became more fully marine. Development preserves a second version of the same story. In whale embryos, the future blowhole begins as a nose at the front of the face, placed where a terrestrial mammal would form nostrils. As growth continues, the opening migrates backward across the developing skull. In a matter of weeks, the embryo repeats a motion that evolution carried out across deep time. The parallel is striking because it joins two records that formed in entirely different ways. Fossils preserve the history of species across rock layers. Embryos preserve the history of body plans through growth. Both point in the same direction. The blowhole is therefore more than a breathing opening. It is a map of ancestry written onto the skull, showing how a land mammal's nose traveled upward until it became one of the defining features of a whale. A single innovation can open doors that were previously invisible. For toothed whales, that innovation was echolocation. Once sound became a tool for perceiving the world, the ocean revealed opportunities scattered across depths, coastlines, river mouths, and ice-covered seas. From the Oligocene onward, the fossil record begins to show the consequences of that change. The toothed whale lineage diversified rapidly, branching into forms adapted to habitats that differed profoundly from one another. Water carries sound with exceptional efficiency. A hunter able to create acoustic images gained access to information unavailable through vision alone. Darkness ceased to be a barrier. Turbid water lost much of its concealment. Distance acquired a new meaning. Natural selection responded by shaping skulls, jaws, nasal passages, and sound processing systems in different ways as populations adapted to local conditions. Some lineages settled in productive coastal waters where fish schools shifted constantly through changing currents. Others ventured into open seas where prey could be sparse and widely distributed. Certain groups entered estuaries where fresh water and salt water mixed, creating environments filled with suspended sediment. Each setting rewarded different refinements of the same sensory system, gradually producing a remarkable diversity of head shapes and hunting styles. The bottlenose dolphin emerged as one expression of that flexibility. Fast, adaptable, and capable of exploiting many prey types, it relies on rapid sequences of high-frequency clicks to track fish and navigate complex surroundings. Its skull reflects a balance between versatility and efficiency, suited to an animal that thrives in environments ranging from sheltered bays to offshore waters. Far below the reach of sunlight, another path unfolded. The sperm whale became a specialist of the deep ocean, descending as much as 3,000 meters, which is about 1,864 miles, into darkness where giant squid drift through cold water. It produces the most powerful biological sounds known, generating acoustic pulses capable of probing immense volumes of ocean. In that environment, sound became the primary bridge between hunter and prey. Near the polar regions, the narwhal followed a different course. Its long, spiraling tusk, actually an extended tooth, projects forward from the head and contains a rich network of sensory pathways. Research suggests it may help detect subtle variations in temperature, pressure, and salinity. In waters covered by drifting ice, such information can provide valuable awareness of changing conditions. The orca represents yet another adaptation. Living in highly social groups, it combines echolocation with cooperation. Pods coordinate movements, share information, and execute hunting strategies that vary across populations. Some specialize in fish, others pursue marine mammals, and still others exploit prey unique to their local ecosystems. Their behavior reveals how intelligence, communication, and sensory precision can reinforce one another across generations. Despite their differences, all of these animals trace their ancestry to a common toothed whale that lived around 34 million years ago. That ancestor could never have anticipated the forms its descendants would take. The ocean continually presented new challenges, and each lineage answered them in its own way. Through countless generations, sonar guided that process, shaping hunters that came to occupy nearly every corner of the marine world. A skull emerging from desert rock can carry an entire ocean inside it. In 2008, during a school field trip to the Pisco Formation of Peru, a researcher noticed something extraordinary weathering from the stone. The fossil proved to belong to one of the most formidable predators ever discovered, a whale whose remains preserved a chapter from a time when giant hunters competed across Miocene seas. The animal was named Leviathan melvillei, honoring both the biblical sea monster Leviathan and Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick. It lived between roughly 12 and 9 million years ago, when marine ecosystems supported an abundance of large prey. Although its overall length, estimated between 13 and 17.5 meters, which is about 8 to 11 miles, placed it within the size range of a modern sperm whale. Nearly every detail of its skull pointed toward a very different lifestyle. The head alone measured about 3 meters, which is about 1.9 miles in length, and approached 2 meters, which is about 1.2 miles in width. Its jaws carried teeth unlike those of any living whale. Individual teeth reached approximately 36 centimeters in length and were coated in thick enamel. Most modern sperm whales possess large teeth only in the lower jaw, using them primarily to seize squid. Leviathan carried massive functional teeth in both jaws, creating a biting apparatus designed for gripping, puncturing, and tearing substantial prey. Paleontologists examining the skull recognized proportions associated with tremendous force generation. The attachment areas for jaw-closing muscles were exceptionally large. When those muscles contracted, they likely delivered one of the most powerful bites ever produced by a four-limbed vertebrate animal. Scientists have described its dentition as representing the largest biting teeth known from any animal in Earth's history, excluding tusks, which serve different purposes and operate under different mechanical demands. Such anatomy offers clues about diet. Tooth shape, enamel thickness, and skull architecture all indicate that Leviathan occupied the role of a macropredator, specializing in large vertebrate prey. Baleen whales, between 7 and 10 meters long, which is about 4.3 to 6.2 miles, seals, dolphins, and perhaps sizable sharks would have fallen within its hunting range. This was a whale that pursued other marine mammals, meeting them with a mouth equipped for direct confrontation. The Miocene oceans contained another giant hunter, the enormous shark commonly known as megalodon. Fossils from the same broad period suggest that both predators shared overlapping ecosystems, one dominated through cartilage and rows of replaceable teeth. The other brought mammalian intelligence, powerful musculature, and a skull built around a devastating bite. Their coexistence hints at seas filled with ecological competition on a scale difficult to imagine today. Leviathan stands as a reminder that whale evolution did not move along a single path toward filter feeding or squid hunting. Across millions of years, different branches explored different possibilities. Some lineages refined sonar, others expanded into colossal grazers of plankton. Leviathan followed another route entirely, becoming a hunter whose jaws embodied the full predatory potential of a mammal that had long ago surrendered the land and claimed the sea. The Pisco Formation does not preserve a single predator's story. Its desert layers hold evidence of an ecosystem where more than one giant occupied the same waters, each shaped by a different ancestry, each capable of attacking prey few other animals could threaten. In the Miocene seas off what is now Peru, mammalian power and shark evolution reached a rare point of overlap. Leviathan melville was one of those hunters. The other was Ototus megalodon, the largest shark known from the fossil record. Teeth attributed to this shark have been found in deposits linked to the same broader marine world that preserved Leviathan. Megalodon is estimated to have reached about 15 to 20 meters long, which is about 49 to 66 feet, placing it among the largest predators ever to move through the ocean. Their bodies were built from different materials and histories. Leviathan carried a whale skull with enormous enamel-coated teeth, powerful jaw muscles, warm blood, air-breathing lungs, and a brain inherited from a lineage of increasingly complex marine mammals. Megalodon carried a cartilaginous skeleton, rows of replaceable teeth, and the refined predatory design of sharks, a lineage that had been hunting successfully for hundreds of millions of years. The prey field brought them into the same ecological space. During the Miocene, baleen whales were diversifying and increasing in size, creating a rich source of large-bodied food. Evidence from tooth shape, jaw mechanics, and associated fossils suggests that both Leviathan and Megalodon could target sizable marine mammals. Baleen whales between 7 and 10 meters long, which is about 23 to 33 feet, would have represented valuable prey for predators capable of overpowering them. This made their coexistence extraordinary. Two apex hunters, each longer than a school bus, occupied overlapping seas and pursued similar resources. Direct evidence of combat between them has not been confirmed. No fossil preserves a clear battle, and no tooth mark can yet prove that one attacked the other. Still, ecological overlap alone is significant. Competition does not need a preserved encounter to matter. Shared prey can shape behavior, range, and survival across generations. Predation pressure may also have influenced the whales being hunted. As baleen whales spread through Miocene oceans, larger bodies and new feeding patterns may have offered advantages in a world containing enormous predators. Size can reduce vulnerability, extend travel capacity, and help animals exploit food patches across great distances. The rise of giant prey and giant hunters likely formed part of the same changing marine system. Both dominant predators eventually disappeared. Megalodon vanished around 3.6 million years ago. The lineage of large predatory sperm whales that included Leviathan also faded from the record sometime during the Pliocene. Their exits were likely tied to shifting ocean conditions, changing prey distributions, and ecological pressures that altered the seas they had once ruled. What remained was another branch of the whale story. The baleen whales, once prey for these immense hunters, continued along their own path. The ocean that had supported Leviathan and Megalodon passed away, but the descendants of hunted whales moved forward, carrying the next transformation into colder, more productive waters. Far below the reach of sunlight, the story of one whale lineage continues in a form few early whale ancestors could have anticipated. The modern sperm whale carries traces of a predatory heritage that stretches deep into the past, though its battlefield is no longer the surface sea where giant hunters once pursued other whales. Its realm lies in the depths, where darkness remains complete throughout every hour of every day. A fully grown male sperm whale can reach 18 meters in length, which is about 59 miles. It can weigh as much as 57 tons, placing it among the largest toothed animals ever known. The body is built for journeys that push the limits of mammalian physiology. A single dive may last up to 90 minutes, carrying the animal down to depths approaching 3,000 meters, which is about 1,864 miles. At such depths, pressure rises to levels that would overwhelm a human body within moments. No sunlight reaches those waters. Colors disappear, shadows disappear, even the distinction between day and night loses meaning. In that environment, vision becomes secondary, and another sense takes command. The sperm whale moves through darkness using biological sonar, refined over millions of years. Each click it produces travels through the water, strikes distant objects, and returns with information about shape, distance, movement, and texture. Those clicks are the most powerful biological sounds known. Measurements have reached approximately 230 decibels. Through pulses of sound, the whale constructs a detailed acoustic map of a world its eyes cannot fully explore. Schools of fish, underwater ridges, and moving prey emerge as patterns of returning echoes. Hunting becomes an act of listening with extraordinary precision. The primary target waiting in those depths is the giant squid. Some individuals may exceed 10 meters in length, which is about 6.2 miles, including their long feeding tentacles. Their eyes are among the largest in the animal kingdom, adapted for detecting faint disturbances in dark water. Along their arms and tentacles sit rows of powerful suckers edged with sharp structures capable of gripping struggling prey. Encounters between sperm whales and giant squid leave physical evidence. The skin of many adult whales bears circular scars scattered across the head and body. These marks match the dimensions of squid suckers and remain long after the encounter ends. Each scar records a struggle that unfolded far beneath the surface, in a region of the ocean that remains difficult for humans to study directly. The details of those confrontations remain largely concealed by depth and darkness, though their traces travel back to the surface on the bodies of the whales themselves. Dominating the front of the whale is its enormous squared head, which can account for nearly 1/3 of total body length. Inside sits the spermaceti organ, a chamber filled with waxy oil. Research indicates an important role in focusing sound during echolocation. Some scientists have also proposed that it may contribute to buoyancy control and pressure management during deep dives, though those ideas continue to be studied. Within this immense head, sound became a tool capable of replacing light. The lineage that once produced giant surface predators now survives through mastery of the deep ocean, navigating a world defined by echoes rather than sight. Across the oceans of the modern world, one whale stands apart through behavior more than size. It does not possess the mass of the great baleen whales, nor does it descend into the deepest waters with the endurance of the sperm whale. Its distinction emerges from something less visible and far more flexible: the orca transformed intelligence, cooperation, communication, and learning into hunting tools of extraordinary effectiveness. An adult orca typically measures between 6 and 8 meters in length, which is about 4 to 5 miles, and can weigh as much as 6 tons. Those figures place it well below the largest marine predators in sheer physical scale. A blue whale outweighs it many times over. A mature sperm whale bull is vastly larger. Even so, few predators in Earth's history have demonstrated such versatility across such a broad range of prey. Researchers have documented orcas hunting at least 23 of the approximately 89 known whale and dolphin species. Their targets include porpoises, dolphins, seals, sea lions, large sharks, and whales considerably larger than themselves. Groups of orcas have been observed attacking humpback whales, gray whales, and even sperm whales. In such encounters, success emerges from coordination, persistence, and collective strategy rather than individual size. What makes these hunts especially significant is that different populations employ different techniques. Orcas living in separate regions often behave as though they belong to distinct cultural traditions. Calves learn from their mothers and relatives, acquiring local knowledge through observation and experience. Those behaviors pass from one generation to the next and can persist for decades. Near Antarctica, some groups create waves to wash seals from floating ice. Several animals swim together with precise timing, generating a surge that breaks across the ice surface. Along the coast of Norway, other populations practice carousel feeding. Schools of fish are gathered into dense spheres, compressed from multiple directions, then struck with powerful tail blows that stun prey before consumption. Certain populations along the Pacific coast of North America focus heavily on sharks, showing dietary preferences unlike neighboring groups. These patterns reveal something unusual. Hunting methods are not distributed uniformly throughout the species. Geography shapes tradition, tradition shapes behavior. Knowledge becomes an inherited resource passed through social learning. In that sense, each pod carries a history that exists within memory as much as within genetics. Communication supports this way of life. Every pod possesses distinctive vocal patterns that function almost like regional dialects. Echolocation remains essential for locating prey and navigating the underwater world, yet sound serves additional purposes during coordinated hunts. Information can move through the group as animals adjust position, respond to changing conditions, and maintain cohesion beneath the surface. The result is a predator capable of adapting to environments that differ dramatically from one another. Arctic waters, temperate coasts, open oceans, and productive fishing grounds all present unique challenges. Orcas meet those challenges with a combination of learning and cooperation that few animals can match. 50 million years earlier, the ancestors of whales moved cautiously through wetlands and river margins. Countless generations reshaped bones, senses, bodies, and behaviors. Within the orca, that long transformation reached a form defined less by size than by capability. Evolution produced many giants along the way. It also produced a hunter whose greatest strength resides in the minds working together within the pod. Some transformations leave marks on bones, others reshape the architecture of the mind. As whale evolution continued across open oceans, changes were unfolding inside the skull that would prove just as significant as the movement of limbs, nostrils, or tails. A new environment demanded new ways of perceiving the world, and the nervous system responded. Researchers studying early whale evolution have noted a substantial increase in brain size beginning during the Eocene. This shift coincided with the movement from rivers, estuaries, and coastal habitats into broader marine settings. The change was not uniform across every lineage, yet the overall pattern appears repeatedly. As whales entered larger and more complex environments, their brains expanded alongside new behavioral demands. Life in the open ocean presents challenges unlike those faced by animals moving through forests or along shorelines. Direction exists in every dimension. An animal can travel forward, backward, upward, downward, or across immense horizontal distances. Landmarks are sparse. Water currents change constantly. Prey moves through a fluid world where sound often carries farther than sight. Navigation becomes an ongoing cognitive task rather than a simple matter of following familiar terrain. Communication added another layer of complexity. Many whale and dolphin species live in social groups whose members maintain contact across large distances. Information about food, danger, migration routes, and social relationships must be transmitted and interpreted. Individuals need to recognize companions, remember interactions, and respond appropriately to changing circumstances. Such demands favor nervous systems capable of processing large amounts of information rapidly and flexibly. Among modern animals, dolphins possess some of the highest brain to body ratios known, exceeded primarily by humans. Sperm whales followed a different path. Their bodies became enormous, and their brains expanded as well. In absolute size, the sperm whale brain remains the largest known in the animal kingdom. Its mass exceeds that of any terrestrial mammal and reflects a lineage that evolved under unique environmental pressures. The outer layers of the whale brain reveal additional clues. The neocortex is heavily folded, creating extensive surface area within a confined space. Similar patterns in other mammals are associated with sophisticated information processing, social behavior, planning, and communication. Though intelligence cannot be measured by a single anatomical feature, the structure of the whale brain suggests substantial computational capacity. Further evidence emerged from microscopic studies. Certain whale species possess spindle neurons, specialized nerve cells associated with rapid social decision-making and intuitive judgments. These cells were once believed to occur only in humans and the great apes. Their presence in whales points toward a separate evolutionary pathway that arrived at some comparable neurological solutions. Behavior offers another perspective. Mirror recognition experiments indicate that some dolphins can identify their own reflections. Whales and dolphins have been observed supporting injured companions, remaining with deceased pod members, engaging in play, and producing distinctive vocal patterns associated with particular individuals. In several species, unique acoustic signatures function almost like personal names. None of these traits appeared all at once. They emerged across millions of years as life in the ocean rewarded perception, memory, cooperation, and communication. The same waters that reshaped bodies also reshaped minds, producing animals whose intelligence became one of the most remarkable outcomes of the whale story. There was no single moment when the ocean produced giants. The transformation unfolded across shifting currents, changing climates, and food webs that gradually rearranged themselves over millions of years. For much of baleen whale history, these animals were large by ordinary standards, yet they remained far from the colossal scale that would later redefine the limits of life. Early baleen whales spent tens of millions of years occupying a range of body sizes that generally fell between 5 meters, which is about 16 feet, and 15 meters, which is about 49 feet. Those dimensions allowed them to thrive in many marine environments, feeding efficiently and traveling great distances. Fossils from these earlier periods reveal successful animals, though none approached the extraordinary proportions of the modern blue whale, fin whale, or bowhead whale. The appearance of truly gigantic baleen whales came surprisingly late. Evidence from the fossil record indicates that the largest forms emerged only within the last 4 to 5 million years. From the perspective of Earth's history, this was a recent development. Whale evolution had already been underway for tens of millions of years before body size accelerated toward unprecedented extremes. The driving force appears to have been a changing planet. During the Pliocene, Roughly 3 to 5 million years ago, global climates cooled and large ice sheets expanded near the poles. These changes altered ocean circulation on a planetary scale. Deep water, rich in nutrients, rose toward the surface more frequently, feeding immense blooms of microscopic life. Seasonal cycles associated with sea ice further concentrated productivity in particular regions. Such conditions transformed the oceans into landscapes of abundance. Vast swarms of krill and copepods gathered in dense concentrations. For filter feeding whales, food became available in quantities rarely seen in earlier eras. A larger body suddenly offered significant advantages. An animal capable of engulfing enormous volumes of water during feeding could harvest these concentrated resources with exceptional efficiency. Size provided benefits beyond feeding alone. Larger whales could store greater energy reserves during productive seasons. Those reserves supported migrations spanning thousands of kilometers, which is about hundreds to thousands of miles depending on the route, connecting rich feeding grounds with breeding areas, often separated by entire ocean basins. A massive body also conserved heat effectively during journeys through colder waters. Generation after generation, natural selection favored individuals capable of exploiting this new ecological opportunity. Gradual increases accumulated until certain lineages crossed thresholds never previously reached by mammals. The result was a group of animals whose dimensions exceeded nearly every biological precedent. The blue whale stands at the summit of that process, reaching about 30 meters, which is about 98 feet, and weighing around 200 tons. It surpasses every known dinosaur, marine reptile, and mammal in total mass. Its heart can weigh hundreds of pounds, and its largest blood vessels are broad enough to illustrate the scale of a body operating far beyond ordinary experience. What makes this achievement especially striking is its origin. The lineage leading to these giants began with small terrestrial mammals living more than 52 million years ago. Across countless generations, feet became flippers, tails became engines, jaws became filtering systems, and bodies expanded to dimensions unmatched in the history of life. The largest animal ever known emerged from a family tree that once could have stood comfortably in the shadow of a much larger predator. Few stories in natural history unfold with the clarity found in the history of whales. Across deserts, river sediments, coastal deposits, and ancient seabeds, a sequence of discoveries has accumulated over generations, each fossil settling into place like a page recovered from a very old manuscript. What emerges is not a scattered collection of unrelated bones, but a continuous narrative stretching from land to sea. When Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species in 1859, he recognized that the transformation of a land mammal into a whale would appear extraordinary. He pointed to such transitions as predictions of evolutionary theory, expecting that future discoveries would reveal the missing stages. At the time, those fossils had not yet been found. The evidence remained incomplete, and many chapters of the story were still buried within rock. The decades that followed gradually filled those gaps. Paleontologists uncovered animals that occupied positions exactly where evolutionary theory suggested they should exist. Indohyus appeared as a small relative connected to the lineage near its beginning. Pakicetus carried traits of a terrestrial mammal while already showing characteristics associated with whales. Ambulocetus combined walking and swimming adaptations. Rhodocetus pushed farther into marine life. Dorodon and Basilosaurus revealed bodies that were fully aquatic while still preserving traces of their terrestrial ancestry. What gives these discoveries unusual strength is their arrangement in time. The fossils do not appear in random order. They occur in geological layers that match the sequence expected from a gradual transition. Earlier forms are found in older rocks. More specialized forms appear later. Each stage occupies the time window predicted by the evidence that came before it. The chronology forms a coherent pattern extending across millions of years. A second line of evidence arrived from genetics. By examining the inherited information carried within living species, researchers discovered that whales belong within the even-toed hoofed mammal group. Their closest living relatives are hippopotamuses. This conclusion emerged independently of the fossil record. Scientists studying genes approached the question through an entirely different method, yet they arrived at the same family relationship and a divergence timeline consistent with paleontological findings. Chemical evidence provides another layer. Variations in oxygen isotopes preserved within fossil teeth record shifts between freshwater and marine environments. These signatures reveal animals moving progressively toward life in the ocean. The isotope record traces ecological change in a way that neither bones nor genetics can accomplish alone. Even so, its conclusions align with both. Three separate fields, paleontology, genetics, and geochemistry, converge upon the same account. Each uses different materials, different techniques, and different assumptions. Fossils describe anatomy. Genes reveal ancestry. Isotopes record habitat. None depends upon the others for its existence. Their agreement carries unusual weight because the evidence streams developed independently before meeting at the same destination. Science rarely receives a history written across so many sources at once. In the case of whale evolution, predictions were made, discoveries followed, and additional methods repeatedly confirmed the result. The transition from a small terrestrial mammal to the rulers of the modern ocean stands among the most thoroughly documented transformations ever recovered from Earth's past, preserved across stone, chemistry, and inheritance with remarkable consistency. The ocean works upon bodies without intention. It does not plan, choose, reward with kindness, or punish with anger. It presents conditions, and living things either meet those conditions or fade from the record. For whales, the sea became more than a habitat. It became the force that revised nearly every part of them. Water changes movement first. A body built for legs must learn a new relationship with weight, balance, and resistance. Bones that once carried an animal across land became less useful than a spine that could flex, limbs that could steer, and a tail that could drive the body forward. The ocean made walking unnecessary, then made it impossible. Breathing became a problem of timing and position. A mammal entering the sea still needed air, yet the surface was no longer a place to stand. The nostrils traveled across the skull, generation after generation, until breathing could happen with only the top of the head exposed. The blowhole was a solution written into bone by repeated contact with water. Hearing changed as well. Sound behaves differently below the surface. It travels farther, faster, and with more information than it often carries through air. Early whale ears became dense, specialized, and increasingly isolated from the skull. Later, toothed whales turned sound into a sensory world, building acoustic images from echoes in places where sight could not guide them. Feeding followed two different paths. Some whales refined pursuit, teeth, cooperation, and sonar until the ocean produced dolphins, sperm whales, and orcas. Others surrendered the chase and transformed the mouth into a filtering structure, drawing nourishment from swarms of tiny animals gathered by currents and seasons. The same sea made hunters and giants from the same ancestry. Depth added another demand. Pressure increases with descent. Light vanishes. Cold presses against the body. Air becomes distant. In response, whales developed enormous oxygen stores, altered blood chemistry, powerful diving reflexes, and bodies capable of descending into regions that would destroy most mammals. The sea did not need to become gentle. The animals became suited to it. Social life also changed underwater. Vision weakens across distance, but sound can cross entire stretches of ocean. Calls, clicks, songs, and learned signals became tools of connection. Groups could coordinate, migrate, hunt, teach, and remember. In some lineages, intelligence grew alongside the demands of communication and movement through a three-dimensional world without roads, trees, or horizons. Across this story, every great feature appears as an answer to pressure. The ear, the pelvis, the vanishing legs, the blowhole, the baleen, the sonar, the brain, each marks a negotiation between mammal and sea. None appeared fully formed. Each accumulated through small changes preserved because they helped bodies survive where land-borne designs began to fail. The ocean took a small, hoofed mammal and placed it inside a different set of rules. Under those rules, it became larger, stranger, more social, more acoustic, and more powerful than its ancestors could ever have been on land. The same evolutionary process continued, but the canvas changed, and the results became whales. Near the end of this story, the word monster begins to feel inadequate. It captures size, power, and dominance, yet it misses the deeper transformation that unfolded across millions of years. When we ask when whales first became monsters, we are really asking how life can become something so different from where it began that the starting point seems almost impossible to recognize. The fossil record answers that question with patience. It does not point to a single moment, a sudden leap, or an extraordinary individual. It reveals countless ordinary lives unfolding across immense spans of time. Each generation faced its own immediate challenges: find food, avoid predators, raise offspring, survive long enough to pass on what worked. Evolution built whales from those small decisions repeated over and over again. Indohyus did not move into water because it foresaw the future. Water offered protection. A frightened animal stepping into a river could escape dangers waiting on land. Dense bones helped it remain submerged, and that simple advantage became part of a larger story. The first chapter was written through survival, not ambition. Pakicetus followed a similar path. Rivers and shorelines provided opportunities. Fish and other prey gathered near the water's edge. Its body remained suited to life on land, yet its hearing already carried clues about a future direction. Deep within the skull were structures linking it to descendants that would one day cross entire oceans. Ambulocetus traveled farther along that path. Water shaped more of its daily existence. Powerful limbs moved it through estuaries and coastal habitats. Rhodocetus ventured even deeper into aquatic life. With each transition, features inherited from land mammals were altered, reduced, repurposed, or discarded. No generation transformed completely. Each contributed a small adjustment to a lineage that never stopped changing. Millions of years later, those accumulated changes produced forms that would have seemed unimaginable to their distant ancestors. Dorodon spent its life entirely at sea. Basilosaurus became a giant predator. Toothed whales transformed sound into a sensory system capable of constructing detailed acoustic maps. Baleen whales converted immense blooms of tiny prey into bodies larger than any animal that had ever lived. Orcas developed hunting traditions passed through generations, creating cultures that differed between populations separated by geography. Viewed from a human perspective, these outcomes appear dramatic. Viewed from the perspective of evolution, they are the consequence of persistence. A lineage kept encountering new pressures and continued adapting to them. Rivers led to coastlines. Coastlines led to open water. Open water led to depths, migrations, communication systems, and ecological opportunities unavailable on land. What makes this transformation extraordinary is that its beginning appears so modest. The ancestor of whales was neither giant nor dominant. It did not command oceans. It did not hunt whales, squid, or seals. It occupied a world filled with larger predators and constant risk. Its descendants inherited that vulnerability, then carried it into new environments where different possibilities emerged. The monster at the summit of the ocean food web began as prey. The largest animal in Earth's history began as a mammal small enough to disappear among riverbank vegetation. Between those two realities lies the story told by whale evolution, a record showing how time, pressure, and opportunity can reshape life until it becomes something entirely new. Far above the continental shelf, beneath a sky scattered with stars, a humpback whale begins to rise. The ascent starts dozens of feet below the surface. Water presses against a body weighing roughly 40 tons. Powerful strokes of the tail drive it upward. Its long pectoral fins draw close to the body. Speed builds through the dark water. Nothing about the movement appears hesitant. The whale commits completely to a destination it cannot yet see. Then the surface arrives. For an instant, gravity loses its hold. Water falls away in shining sheets as the whale erupts into open air. Thousands of kilograms of living muscle, bone, and blubber hang above the ocean. The body twists. The fins spread. A moment later, the whale crashes back into the sea, sending a burst of white water across the surface and a pulse of energy through the surrounding ocean. Scientists still debate the purpose of breaching. In some situations, it may function as communication. In others, it may help remove parasites attached to the skin. Certain breaches occur during social interactions. Others happen when no obvious audience is present. The behavior remains partly unresolved, one of many reminders that even familiar whales retain aspects of their lives beyond our understanding. Inside that airborne giant rests a history stretching across more than 50 million years. Deep within muscle and blubber lie pelvic bones disconnected from the spine, remnants of a time when distant ancestors walked on land. They no longer support weight or aid locomotion, yet they remain altered and repurposed by evolution instead of erased. The story appears elsewhere throughout the body. The blowhole atop the head began as nostrils positioned at the front of a mammalian face. The broad flippers originated from limbs that once ended in weight-bearing feet. Hidden within the skeleton are finger bones, rearranged into structures suited for steering through water. Even the hearing system carries traces of the transformations that unfolded as generations adapted to life beneath the waves. At the level of development, echoes of that past remain visible. Whale embryos briefly display patterns inherited from terrestrial ancestors before continuing toward their final form. Ancient instructions persist within the genome, preserved across immense spans of time. Evolution rarely starts from nothing. It modifies, redirects, and rebuilds, using older structures as foundations for new possibilities. The blue whale that opened this journey may seem like an endpoint, a creature so large and specialized that further change feels unimaginable. Yet, every species exists within a particular moment. The oceans continue to shift, climates change, food webs reorganize. Future generations will face pressures different from those that shaped the whales of today. For now, the humpback sinks beneath the surface once more. The disturbance fades. Waves close over the place where it emerged. The animal breathes, dives, navigates, communicates, and continues a life shaped by adaptations accumulated across millions of years. Within that moving body lives the memory of rivers, shorelines, estuaries, and ancient seas. A creature that once belonged to land became something entirely different. The breach lasts only seconds. The history carried into the air during that moment spans ages beyond imagination.